Hey guys, and today's video we are continuing with the Scarab Occult Terminators, part of my Thousand Suns army. So in this video we're going to be looking at all the blue highlights and then starting on some of the detail work right at the very end. So the last video we'd done a non-oil wash over the blue parts of the Thousand Suns armour, and now we're going to be touching that up back with Thousand Suns again. So just getting a good mix on palette, making sure that it's nicely watered down to give it a good bit of control, and then we can apply that back over the main parts of the armour, leaving all the non-oil wash in all the recesses and nooks and crannies. So taking a relatively good detail brush, I think this is either a 2 or a 3-0 brush, I'm starting to apply that blue back over. So starting on the shoulder pauldrons here, there's a nice little sort of black recessed ring between the gold and the blue here, and just filling that blue back in so that it tidies all that area up and it's not all patchy with the black wash. Moving down onto the leg grooves here, same kind of thing here, so trying to avoid where you've obviously done all the gold and just filling in the main parts of the blue armour here, leaving that black definitive line between the blue and the gold here. And it's just a case of repeating that across all of the armour, all across the feet, the arms and so on. And now what I'm going to do is add some armour blue to that Thousand Suns blue mix and then start bringing the highlights up. So this is about a 33% mix of armour blue to Thousand Suns blue, so a 3-to-1 mix. And just applying that to the centre parts of the armour again, leaving some of the Thousand Suns blue towards the edge and just highlighting it. As I've done before, I think I've shown a sort of a cylinder icon before, just showing you where the peak towards the light source would actually be coming from, and that's what you're aiming to place the highlight. So really focusing on the middle part here, just sort of directional highlights really, just to leave some of that darker blue in the shadows and the lighter blue towards the front of the model. You can see as I speed this bit of video up, you can see just how I'm actually applying that quite carefully. And because the paint is relatively thin, it does dry quite quickly. And it does sort of mean that you can go over and give it a second coat if you feel it's necessary, and it sort of begins to make those highlights pop a little bit more as it sort of brightens itself up as you go over the same area multiple times. Just picking out the fingers. It's always quite a little difficult bit, I find, because of the multiple joints within each finger, but it also does sort of make it obvious where you need to highlight, I guess. Just finishing off with the top part of the armour now. It's actually quite tricky to do the chest piece on this because of the amount of gold ornamentation across the chest, so you have to be really quite careful. And again with the headdress as well, where you've got so much gold very close to where the blue actually is going to sit, it's quite tricky to try and get that so that it's nice and neat and missing any of the gold that you've already completed. But you know, steady eye, steady hand, and we're good to go. So the next stage then, I've mixed up, it's now a 3-to-1 mix of Ahriman Blue to Thousand Suns Blue, so this is now far brighter than the previous shade. And just sort of not quite going to where the last coat was. So for example, on that blue shoulder pad there, it's not covering the whole part of the shoulder pad, it's sort of focusing almost like a crescent shape towards the front of the model, leaving a slightly darker bit just right in that sort of back corner. And now on the top part of the armour here, top part of the head area, and where all the power units are for that particular part of the Terminator armour, sort of focusing on the higher parts and the real edges again, and just, you know, leaving the previous layer sort of showing through right towards where the shades would actually be. There's hardly any highlighting really required in the middle. It's, you know, it's quite, as I said earlier, it's quite tricky to make sure that with all that gold ornamentation around the middle, it's quite difficult to really bring out a highlight there. It's far easier on the legs here, so sort of just picking the more raised, the higher parts of the cylinder or the curvature of the armour, and then the same on the arms. So we're now moving on to the edge highlights, I guess, really, at this stage. So we're taking some Ahriman Blue and mixing it with a little piece of white. Well, in fact, I'm taking some of the previous leftover paint and mixing it with white. It's the same kind of effect, really. So it's the lighter blue and then adding white to really really make it a bit brighter. So we're going to be focusing on some of the edge highlights and the line highlights within the armour panels itself. So we're probably talking maybe 50% of that previous colour and 50% white now, and you can see the difference on my palette there. It's really quite garish sort of sky blue colour now. This is where you really need to get a good tip on the brush, the finest highlight brush that you've got, and then sort of just pick out those sort of line highlights. So I'm focusing on sort of the front of the circle on those shoulder pads and just sort of doing a crescent shape around the front. Easier part on the top there, on the highest part of the armour there, where the engines and, well, the power units and the head go. There's a nice defined edge highlight there. Then sort of the two joins in between. And then just picking out the nice edges on all the bits of the armour. Very simple process, but you just do need to have really good control with your brush here. Now, even more control required when you start doing these sort of inner line highlights, as it were, on all the armour. You do really need a good brush. Make sure you've got no splayed bristles. You know, if you've got a new brush, use it. We're talking sort of a 3, 4, 5, 0 brush to really get those lines fine. I'm not the best at this, to be honest, but if you've still got that previous mix made up, as I have in the most case next to in my palette there, any real mistakes that you may make if you go a little bit over the top, or you slip, or your brush has a little bit of a moment, you can just soon patch that back in with the previous mix. So it's always a good idea to try and do this stage shortly after the last stage, so that you do have that pre-mix made, just to tidy up any mistakes that you may make. And there we go, that's all the blue done. So the last part of the video then, we're just going to focus on some, blocking in some of the detailed areas here now. So I've got some black and some grey ready to go, so I'm just going to be blacking in all the power cables, the weapon, barrels, anything that's going to be metallic in the final paint job. So here we're just doing the barrels on the combi bolter. And I missed my camera, that's really, really clever, well done. Apologies for that. it's quite challenging with the camera sort of at eye level, as you can see from where, imagine where my head is, that's in effect where the camera is, which kind of blocks my view. But just doing sort of the armoured ribbed cables around the back of the arms that you get on Terminators, and then there's some power cables, and then any sort of in between the armour joints and so on, anything that's going to be grey or metallic. So we've got the engine exhaust or the power unit exhaust system there. Just blacking all those in. So once all the black's done, it's now going to be a case of doing the grey. So this is really where the tabard is, and some of the weapon detail, some of the intricate ornate parts of the combi weapon. And that tabard will sort of be highlighted up the same as I did with the Rubric marine painting. I'll link that in the description below for you, so if you want to reference that. And then really the final part of this this video is going to be just doing the purple on the sorcerer's cloak. So it's quite a thin purple paint, so really it's going to take several coats to achieve a fully blocked in colour. So just taking sort of a 0 size brush, or 1 brush I think this might even be, and just going over that gold. As I said, because it is gold and it's a thin paint, it's going to take several coats to do. But you're just looking at a good even coverage. Let each coat dry before you go on to the next one. Just avoiding those little bits of gold detail at the top. Now there is some sort of swirly parts at the bottom of the gold cloak. I've decided to avoid trying to paint around those. I'll touch those in afterwards. I think that's going to be an easier way of doing it. And there we go. So at this stage, this is kind of where we're at. You can see on one of those I have started to move on to sort of some of the more yellow parts of the armour. It's hardly been touched yet, to be honest, but this is where we're at. So there we go. The next video will be covering the more detailed bits as we finish these off. But I hope you enjoyed the video. Please do give it a like, comment, drop a subscription, that'd be much appreciated, and I shall catch you on the next video.